All right, folks. Well, thank you for joining the live stream. My name is Daniel Krook. I'm a developer advocate and software engineer, and one of the IBM mentors for Call for Code. So you can find me in Slack, callforcode.slack.com. My handle is just my last name at Krook. You can find me at Twitter. It should be on the screen right now. So if you have any issues, questions about Call for Code in general, or more in particular about submitting, which is what we'll talk about in the next few minutes, you can reach out to me. I want to make sure that you are able to submit the best quality application you can, and that you don't lose out by being disqualified by maybe forgetting a required form submission piece of information, or otherwise submitting that maybe is not going to compete against some of the best stuff that's been submitted or will be submitted so far. So yeah, as always, we've got the live stream going this Friday. You can find me virtually. We've also got next Friday. If you go to callforcode.org right now, it'll bounce you over to our /Fridays page, our Call for Code Fridays. So since next Friday is the submission deadline, we're going to probably run a full day of office hours during the 4-hour block to make sure that you've got any questions, any configuration stuff solved, and make sure that you're entered in the competition. And you've also got this nice handy little countdown clock here that's going to stress you out for the next 7 days. It's been stressing me out. You're just looking at it for the last 90 days or so. But that'll say what it is. So it's midnight Friday Pacific time. So hopefully, if you're around the world, you're getting most of that Friday as well to do some last minute development. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a reminder of what Call for Code, the project, is looking for. So that can help you build the best quality submission you have. Again, we're not looking for hacks, things that are just thrown together. By now, ideally, you've worked through a solution and you're kind of in the home stretch now building something. But we also know that many developers do their best work under pressure. So we want to make sure we've got the broadest arrangement of things submitted to the competition. So let's take a look, just a refresher about the competition, right? So participating in Call for Code, most of you, I hope, will have already gone through these steps. If you are a team lead, you may have some other teammates that may not have completed a few other steps. But basically, the first step you had was to go over to callforcode.org/challenge. You can click the register link on the top nav as well. And this will get you eligible for the competition. So there's two different concepts. There's the individual developer or participant, and then there's the team. So there's two different tools for managing that. So the first thing you do is you register, and the reason for that is that gets you access to IBM technology, gets you access to the digital communities on IBM Coder, on Slack. You accept a code of conduct there, so people abide by some standard human decency guidelines and interacting with each other in virtual communities. And it also has you accept a participation agreement so that you understand your rights around the IP of your application, how it's going to be judged, and where it may go after the competition, so that it actually gets deployed somewhere. So you've done that. You'll get an email immediately with a link to go sign up for an IBM account. You'll get unlimited free tier access for a while. You also have $200 of credits if you submit a credit card. If you provide a credit card, it won't be charged. But you will, if you start to use some of the paid services, you may bounce up to the top of that free credit. So there's a video that Tim Robinson, my colleague, created, shows you how to take the best advantage of that. So you'll get the IBM account. Then you'll also get a link to go build with the code patterns. So you may have already had an application in mind which you want to build, but there's also inspirational stuff out there, pre-built applications you can leverage in your submission. Step 4, work through finding teammates, understanding technology, looking through the resources we have in the community to engage, to help you answer questions. And then finally, which is what you'll have to do before next Friday, the end of the day next Friday, is to actually submit your solution that you've built. So that's where I'll focus on mainly on this talk, and we're going to help folks do over the next 7 days. So again, Call for Code is looking for a way to prevent respond to and recover from natural disasters. And these affect people all around the world. So the applications you build that are maybe inspired by your experience locally, perhaps by dealing with a hurricane in your local community, it may be a solution that someone across the world may be able to reuse in the context of a typhoon, for example. So we're looking at a whole bunch of potential problem areas, and hopefully developers who are a growing force around the world can take their solutions and build applications that help communities prepare in advance and save lives by preventing loss to a natural disaster, to responding to them in real time, and building back afterwards. So that's the whole call for code goal, right? Take a very compelling problem that is stretched to the bounds of its current solutions, apply technology from the world's growing community of developers, and bring that all together through a competition that's founded by lots and lots of sponsors, affiliates, partners, and a growing community of supporters, which you can all find on callforcode.org/ecosystem. So again, why would you even submit for the competition, right? Obviously, you want to save lives, improve the health of your community, and ideally help others around the world as well. But there's a huge prize structure involved. There is an award that will be given to the one grand prize team. That'll be the inaugural Call for Code Global Award, awarded on October 29th at a benefit concert in San Francisco. There's a $200,000 cash prize that will be won by that grand prize team. An individual submitter or a team of up to 5 can split that. The project you build, it's not just something to push over the finish line here. It is something that's going to, the winning solutions are going to be given a home in a Linux Foundation, where they'll be provided the support, IP protection, or the IP guidelines and framework that can help build communities around them, establish codes of conduct, things like that, as well as provide some marketing help around the project. You'll have the grand prize team will also have a chance to pitch to a venture capitalist firm, NEA. And so what you build here, as you create and as you bring it to the submission deadline, it could be something that you've been working on for the last couple months, but you could turn into basically your next company, your next career, as it were. And along with that is an opportunity to also take the technology, work with IBM's Corporate Service Corps, which has been around for 10 years, has deployed 1,000 different projects around the world, and work with IBM to take your idea, take the solution you built, and put it into play where it's needed most. The second and third prize winners will also have a cash award and opportunity with the Linux Foundation. So those are also compelling. So if you're not the top prize, there's definitely awards that are in there for you. And because we want to see the best solutions and we want those applied around the world for the long term, we want to make sure that even if you don't make it to these top 5 tiers, that there's a structure and encouragement to still continue to develop it as an open source project. Okay, so the number one part of creating a good solution is making sure that you're identifying the right solution scope, right? So we want to build applications that solve problems identified by experts in the field, be it the United Nations, Red Cross, individual local authorities. And we want solutions that are going to safeguard communities, protect them from natural disasters, help them recover from, and just save lives through technology. Find the best way to do that. So there's a couple of frameworks you can look at. I'll get to these a little bit later, but the Sendai framework defines some targets. There's a lot of potential solution areas that you can find in there, as well as some information from the Red Cross as well on collaborating between public and private. Okay, looking at the overall schedule, the biggest one here is the September 28th submission deadline, next Friday. I'll get into what's actually submitted on that form a little later here. But you're going to go through, after you submit, your application will be will be assigned to a large team of developers who will go through it, make sure that it's technically complete, that's feasible, that solves a problem, and we're also bringing in NGO partners and affiliate partners from universities, for example. So you're going to have your application is going to be looked at by a set of judges that not only are experts in the IBM cloud technologies, but they're also experts in whether this technology is actually going to solve a real world problem. And there's also several different types of judges that will filter through, check it for scalability, transferability, all the judging criteria, until finally it gets to the final round, where eminent technologists like Linus Torvalds, the inventor of Linux and Git, will choose the finalist, choose the ultimate winner, along with a few of our experts from the field, from Columbia University, for example. There's also Grace Kim from Twitter. You can find all of the judges that will be in the final tier on callforcode.org/challenge. There's also a menu item under ecosystem for eminent judges. But it will go through several rounds and will be thoroughly tested, and they will select the final winner from what's made it to that final round. And the top 3 teams will be invited to the award event on October 29th. So there will be a benefit concert there for the UN Human Rights Office as well as the American Red Cross. Okay, so you've decided you've built something that actually solves a real world problem. You're ready to kind of double check your work against what the judges are going to be looking at, and it's pretty straightforward in terms of the judging criteria. So there's a 20-point scale. It's broken out into 4 areas of 5 points, and there are key areas that kind of touch on the functional requirements that you've achieved, the functional impact you've made, as well as some of the non-functional aspects of how well it performs, how speedy it is, how easy it is to work with, as well as your target audience, whether that's somebody who's doing some long-term planning at a computer, whether that's someone in the field using a mobile application or controlling a drone. We'll look at how your application is able to be taken from, well, how complete it is. Can it be built, transferred? Can it be set up by somebody? Can it be easily understood? Does it solve a real world problem? That's the effectiveness and efficiency. Is it usable? And then finally, does it take a new approach to perhaps a long-standing problem? Does it have an immediate 10 times better approach to solving a particular problem, either by just doing something very clever or even just radically simplifying how a process gets done, such as paying out claims, ensuring that fraud is not in the system. So we're looking at lots of different ways that you can apply the technology in an effective way to make a difference. As you registered and as you submit as well, just make sure you go back to that participation agreement that you downloaded when you registered. You can also find it under the FAQ section on callforcode.org. Take a look at that. Make sure that everybody who's on your team of up to 5 people has registered, understands that they're over 18, all the conditions of the competition. Remember that as a team lead, you can be a team of 1, a team of up to 5. There will be only 1 person from the team submitting, though. So not all 5 team members, for example, need to submit. It's just the 1 team member. It'll list the emails of the folks that are on your team and who have registered. And make sure you're using something from the IBM cloud. We've provided a whole bunch of cloud, AI, data, blockchain, as well as standard virtual machines, platforms as a service runtimes, PHP, Node.js, Java, you name it. There's a whole slew of services to take advantage of, so please do that, as well as any sort of open source projects that you want to integrate. And you can integrate data sources from across the internet. You can integrate with, for example, Google Maps as a plotting library for some of your data. So use the IBM cloud, but you can use data sources from everywhere, open source, and what are the services are available to you. And if you haven't already, just take a look at, maybe you started from scratch when you were thinking about your application, but there's a whole bunch of code patterns you can still choose to build upon. And each of these code patterns, these technology areas, has a team lead that's assigned to them. So these people are available within the IBM coder community, within Slack, and they're able to help you make best use of the technology. So if something's not clear, for example, how you deploy a WordPress application to the IBM cloud, maybe to use the web dashboard, um, ping an IBM mentor in Slack or one of these particular areas if it's related to one of the technologies that you're interested in using. Everybody's happy to help, and we want to make sure that that you're spending time building an application that matters and not struggling with any technology where there might be a straightforward solution to how to use it. We're here to make it easier for you. Okay, so assuming you've built out that application, you understand the solution that you want to build. Just like the judging criteria, the actual application form or the submission form that you'll fill out is pretty straightforward. There's only 8 questions on it. And what you'll do is you'll find a link to Unoodle within Slack. It's also in that 5-step chart I shared earlier. You'll create an account on unoodle.com. Again, only the team lead needs to do this, not the entire team. And what you'll do is you'll fill out the team name. Don't put your own name in there. Just put a team name that's kind of easy to remember. The judges will, for the most part, anonymously look at what you submitted. They won't look at teammate names and emails. They'll just see a team name. So provide the team name. Provide up to 4 of your other colleagues who are collaborating with you on this. You don't have to include your own email address here. You can, but just keep in mind that it's already tracked as the person who created the Unoodle account. And make sure that that's actually a working email address. We've been running an internal competition, and we've seen a couple folks listed where clearly there was a typo in the email address, and we had to find out what their real address was. Just be aware, simple stuff like that can mean the difference between if the judge even sees your application that you worked on for so hard, for so long. So be aware of that. You'll give a high-level pitch. This is just a 7-word or less description of what you've built, why it matters. You'll then create about a page worth of documentation, describes the problem, why it's important, ideally providing some statistics or a story in there. Talk about your solution at a high level, and discuss basically the sort of impact that this is going to have. Right? The end goal is to save lives through technology. A preparedness application can save, a magnitude more lives in advance than maybe a recovery solution. Just try to frame the scope of what you're solving here for the judges to understand. You can upload a solution roadmap. This is pretty free form. Depends on the application that you're building. If you're building a mobile application versus an analytics application, kind of the way you describe it, the way you talk about how it's, how mature it is, how it should be deployed. That can be a Word document, a PDF, a PowerPoint. It can be anything that makes sense for you. There's no prescriptive format for that. You'll provide a link to GitHub or another source code repository. I'll get to some best practices about that pretty soon. But obviously, the crux of what you're submitting is not an idea. It is functional working code that can solve a problem. It's a great question. That one has come up before. So normally what you do there is, like many open source projects, is you provide a README, you provide a list of steps, and you would tell the judges, for example, if they have to create an instance of Watson Studio, you tell someone to go create their own instance of it. The judge who's doing the deep dive will go create their own instance and get their own service credentials. And in some other cases, there may be some issues with credentials that, if you do have any that you need to supply, if maybe, for example, there's only one instance of a particular service, it's already been configured totally the way you want it to, this form field, you can overload this, right? So you can provide the URL, and then you can follow that up with any sort of credentials you need. This is a secure form. you can provide them here. I would not put them in the repo. And there is another alternative kind of to do this. I'll get to this a bit. You can invite an outside collaborator. We've got a call for code judges ID on GitHub, and you can keep it a private repo, and they will see it that way. But the preferred way to do it is it should be a public repo if possible. Give instructions for someone how they can build this application, what they need to do, maybe to populate it with data, and give it a way to be transferred from your own instance to somewhere else. But if you need to provide credentials, this is kind of your hook to do that. Or if you can't fit it in here, you can put it in other parts of the solution description area. Okay. All right, and make sure you've got once you've got the application up there, just double check the judging criteria to make sure you've covered anything, made it clear how this application addresses those criteria and the kind of impact it has. A link to a video pitch. So ideally, again, this is a public URL, but if you do have credentials for it, you can leave those in the field or somewhere else in this form where the judges can find them. And list the IBM Cloud service. You only need to use one something on the IBM Cloud. So call out how it's here, so you kind of understand how the technology is being used and kind of the amazing stuff that's being built with it. We're interested in seeing that. So once you do that, you'll save this form and you'll submit it through the Untitled system, and that will enter it in the competition. The important thing to know is that you can't go back and edit this after you submit it. So if you need to iterate on it, work with some colleagues and maybe on pulling together some information, you can save it as a draft. You can work it through. You'll spend some time on it. Just don't submit it until you're absolutely ready to. You can obviously, if you have once you provide your GitHub repo in here, obviously if there's security issues that come up or there's some changes that happen to the code itself, the core of the code, maybe to adapt to how services have changed over time. You can change things independently over in GitHub, but this form itself, your actual entry here, the list of your teammates' names, that doesn't change after submission. So again, be very sure of what you do here. Okay, so once it's submitted, you should get an email confirmation that you've submitted it, and it will go through the judging rounds, and we'll alert folks who make it to the top counts. You'll know where you stand after judging is complete, and you'll get contacted if you've made it to a certain tier. There's some travel arrangements that need to be made, some visas that need to be secured. We'll contact you through the Untitled address that you provided. So again, make sure that is correct. It's an email address that you check often. It's something that you can monitor very easily. We don't want you to lose out on the competition based on technicalities like that. Okay, so that was the form. Let me talk through a few of the tips, the other tips. I talked to some of them already, but and you may have seen some information from Brian from Angel Hack earlier today. If you hadn't, it's recorded in this live stream. It was the kickoff talk. But basically, I can't stress this part enough. I mean, there's a lot of really amazing technology out there that's fun to play with. It's really cool to build something, hack together something in the afternoon. But the fundamental thing you've got to look at is this technology that's making a difference? Is it easy to use? Is it going to make an impact? Think about honestly, if you're creating an application, is it for someone who may be under a lot of stress or panicking or doesn't speak English as a native language? Is it something that's going to help them rather than frustrate them and perhaps even make things worse for them? We don't want to see issues where we use technology for the sake of technology. Maybe it's a really cool AI application, but if it requires just a lot of concentration in the heat of the moment on a mobile device, asking too many questions, requiring too much input, or just something that somebody would frankly not even want to use and just use something simpler. Just think about that. Think about your target audience. Empathize with the persona that you're trying to build your application for. Think about whether your grandmother might use this application. Think about a young person might use this. Just think about a range of conditions it might be used in, and think about and look to the frameworks that are provided by the NGOs. So the Sendai framework, understand what the real world solution, what problems are, where they have identified goals for improving the state of disaster preparedness. Look to that. Look to the real problems, and don't always just gravitate towards you know the sexy, dramatic, really cool technology solution. We don't. We want to. We want to improve the state of disaster preparedness and recovery. We don't want to overload it with technology that's just thrown at the problem without really understanding the problem. So we've got a bunch of tech talks as well up on the developer.ibm.com/call for code site. We've been running series talking to local authorities like police. We've talked to scientists in the field. We've talked to people that are helping on the ground, for example, in Puerto Rico. There's a whole bunch of tech talks where you can get great insight into the types of problems that are out there and how technology might help them. What things weren't available when they were in the midst of a crisis that they would love to have in advance. There's lots of great insight there, and you can get it here. You can find it on the web, but really, empathize again with the first responders too. Those authorities that are responsible for saving lives in their community, and look to that first to make sure that your application really makes sense. And there's a bunch of other great research out in the field that helps you avoid this techno solutionism, just throwing technology from Silicon Valley at the problem without understanding the underlying, perhaps, fundamental issues that are out there that need to be solved before technology can even make the right impact. So again, my top number one tip, find the persona, empathize with them, understand what they need, and make sure that you're not getting in the way, but you're improving what they do to save lives. Tip number two, this one goes again back to some of the, once you've built out your solution. So we've learned a lot from running this internal IBM competition, which was on an earlier time frame than the external one. And what we've learned is one of the easiest ways to really understand how capable code is if the developers have taken the time not only to build something great, to include test scripts, to include screenshots, to include things, is to really lay out in the source code repo the steps for replicating, for building, for testing, for using the technology, and also understanding how it maps out to the problem that it's solving. So there's a bunch of resources that you can you rely on. Just Googling for README best practices. There's a bunch of templates you can use. You can learn about what really goes into making it very evident for someone who's going to take either an end user down the road or a judge who's just taking a look at just a lot of submissions, and they really want to see ones that stand out. This is one of the best places to really spend your time. Make sure it's very clear what your application does. It doesn't take a lot of digging to understand how it's used or how to set it up, things like that. So look for the README best practices. Some of them don't include another bit of information, which is you can embed a link to YouTube in there, to your demo video, your screenshots. Just make it as easy as possible for someone to a judge to look at that and say, okay, there's something here. There's time, there's care that went into this, there's thought that went into this. And so again, with the submission form too, you've got a lot of different ways to hook the judges. This is one of the ways. So depending on, make sure it's consistent between all these avenues, because you're going to be appealing to technical judges, to experts in the field type of judges, executive type judges, and they're all going to look at maybe they prefer to look at the demo video versus diving into the code, or they'd rather look at a PowerPoint presentation or some slides. Make sure all of these are high quality, of course, but that they also tell a similar story so that your judges, regardless of their background, can understand what you've built. Okay, and kind of building on that point, right? So one of the easiest ways to hook the judge is they've got if they only have 3 minutes, most of them are going to just go to the video and understand what you've built to get a feel for what you've created. Again, there's many judges, and they only add incrementally to the overall score. But if you have a judge that only has a few minutes to look over a lot of submissions, this is a great way to get that hook, right? And Brian, if you were on the Brian from Angel Hack, if you were on the call earlier with him, talked through some of the best ways to use your time in that video. So once the thing is produced, it's under 30 seconds. I'm sorry, 30 minutes, 3 minutes. The way he suggested breaking it down was use the first 45 minutes to set the stage, lay out the scope of the problem, why it's important to solve, and how you've solved it at a high level. Then kick over to showing your solution in action, what the end user persona is that is using that application, whether it's an expert, survivor, something like that, so that they can get the feel for how complex, complete, and how it really is solving the problem, right? And then use the end time to talk about any sort of results that you've already used to compare the effectiveness of your solution against that problem and where you might go next, right? So if you personalize this around hurricanes, again, if there's a way to expand out this general idea to give judges the feel for how it might be transferred elsewhere and used in different contexts beyond the one that you highlighted in the demo video. And there's no prescribed resolution or tools for building this. From my personal point of view, what I always do with my demos, any sort of code demos in general, is I use Camtasia, I record my screen going through a demo, totally focusing on the user experience, not saying a word, just going through it, very deliberately going through the menus, showing the mobile device simulator. I capture that video. I then write out a script, or I can do that first. Write that out in a Word document or something, break it down into like 30-second segments or even 10-second segments, which you can then later splice together with the video. And it's very effective because as you're doing the demo, you're not worried too much about talking through it. You're focusing on doing it correctly. You're not wasting time doing both things at the same time poorly. It lets you focus on doing the audio in one go, the demo in another go, and it lets you cut the pieces to really fit the time that you have. So I really do recommend that you spend time on that and not wasting time watching a spinner spin, right? Make use of that time and be judicious with what you cut and what you show. Okay, tip number 4. So again, one of the lessons we've learned from judging this internally is people tend to, they get excited about the application, build the application, create the demo video, they submit it, but they haven't maybe quite taken the time to test it outside their team, whether somebody who's not logged into YouTube, for example, or not logged into GitHub can see their application, right? So that has required a lot of churn internally that we have been able to afford, fortunately, in the internal competition, but we won't have the time to afford for the external competition. So when you fill out your application form, double check, triple check the permissions on everything. The safest thing to do is to make your GitHub repo or whatever source code repo that you have on the internet just public. If there are any credentials, as I said, include those in the form that you submit with Moodle. But if you just flip your code to public and you do that the day of the submission, where if you're afraid someone's going to steal your great idea, if you do that the day of the submission, that's much less likely. And the same applies to the video. I would err on the side of just making everything public. The spirit of this competition is for people to develop solutions that the world can use. So my most thorough recommendation here is just open source it, give it an Apache 2 license. That is the most popular one. It's got a lot of advantages. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the most popular one that's out there for most applications. It's what the winning solution will have to license their application as when they go into the Linux Foundation anyway. So that may be one to explore. There's a few other as well. GitHub makes it very easy to kind of understand what's implied by each of the license types, but that's totally up to you. Apache 2 is the most popular one. So, but if you do have a private repo, there's one kind of workaround for this. We have a service ID, as it were, in GitHub, and that is call for code judges. You can invite that account as an outside collaborator to your private repo, and they would have access to see what's in your repository while it's private. It's not ideal. It makes judging a little more difficult than if it was just a public repo, but that is a potential way to keep it private while sharing it with the judges. And if you provide a private repo, private video, make sure you include those, the credentials to access it. Okay, so those were my top 4 tips. Again, the most important piece you can do, make sure is all your team members have registered for the challenge, that they're eligible, that they're over 18, that they understand what participation means. Get your account. You can share resources between your teammates by inviting other folks to your account. Look at those code patterns. There's a whole bunch of new stuff that's, even to this moment, being released. So for example, we even just published a blog recently with International Space Station data that comes from NASA. So you may want to look at that. There's some other patterns that have been released on a regular cadence. There's some interesting ones, some labs that have been done around drone, IoT, visual recognition. So there's still stuff that you can add to your application or swap in if you weren't happy with your current implementation. See what's out there, and always continue to watch those, the developer.ibm.com site for additional content that might help you make a stronger submission. You're going to want to rely on the community. You know, if you need any help with your submission, any recommendations, any questions, all the IBM mentors are in the Slack community, as well as monitoring the IBM Coder forums. And then go ahead and submit your solution. So here's the link, bit.ly/cfc-submit. You can also find that linked from within the communities. And with that, good luck. And let me see if there's any other questions from Mike. Oh, wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you, Omar. Cool. Okay, great. Thanks. Bye.